Steve McQueen's films exhibit a profound exploration of the body as a site of suffering, catharsis and thematic allegory. Through meticulous attention to physicality, McQueen underscores the visceral impact of societal issues on individuals, creating a compelling narrative that extends beyond the intellectual and the corporeal. In Hunger, 2008, the body becomes a central vessel for conveying the intense suffering endured by political prisoners during the Irish hunger strike. McQueen's deliberate focus on the deteriorating physical condition of Bobby Sands, portrayed by Michael Fassbender, is both unflinching and transformative. The extreme weight loss and depiction of bodily decay serve as a powerful visceral metaphor for the resilience and sacrifice of individuals in their pursuit of justice. The body in this context becomes a canvas upon which the toll of political struggle is vividly painted. The film's central act contains most of the dialogue. Otherwise, the film is bookended by dialogue-free exposition using long takes of everyday life and death for the prisoners and their handlers. McQueen was an accomplished visual artist at this point in his career, having studied fine arts and created numerous art installations and produced multiple short films. Channel 4's Film 4 wing offered him somewhere in the region of £1 million to make a film, perhaps thinking he would produce something from his own environment of immediate experience, growing up as a black man in the UK. Directing a feature film intimately depicting a sensitive point in the Troubles may not have seemed to many to be an obvious choice. However, McQueen showed that he identified with the disenfranchisement and oppression and could relate to such a story, one that had affected him growing up. No one ever really thought that the hunger strikers would make good on their threats, and certainly not to the extent to which they followed through. 10 hunger strikers died before the strikes were called off, and the Thatcherite administration gave any ground in the impasse. It is hard to fathom how a national psyche would have been affected by a death almost weekly over the course of a summer in 1981. McQueen presents a microcosm of the travesty by depicting an intimate and up-close rendering of Bobby Sands' suffering, as displayed by Michael Fassbender's body in his portrayal of Sands. At the same time, he does not simply portray the loyalist authorities as villains. Many of them lived with the reality of those troubles and had their own fear and consequences to deal with. The film doesn't judge, it just observes. Shame, 2011, further emphasises McQueen's exploration of the body, this time in the context of addiction. The protagonist, Brandon, played by Fassbender, grapples with a compulsive and self-destructive relationship with his own body. McQueen skillfully uses the physicality of Brandon's actions to convey the emotional turmoil and self-loathing associated with addiction. The body, in this instance, becomes a battleground where the character's internal struggles manifest, offering a raw and unfiltered portrayal of the human experience. As the centre of his own universe, Brandon fails to see those unravelling around him. His sister has deep issues as well, but Brandon is blinded and seeking his own connection, while arguably looking in all the wrong places. It is an old adage that one who cannot control their voices will be ruled by them, and Brandon finds himself in that place where he is effectively a slave to his urges. Addiction can happen to anyone and can take many forms. Here McQueen tackles one form of addiction which does not necessarily spring to mind when conversing about the topic, but for McQueen's storytelling purposes works somewhat better than a story about drug addiction or alcoholism, which have often been depicted in film. Brandon has gone to such lengths to find something through sex which is not necessarily there to begin with, and certainly not when taken to such extremes. He cannot, for example, relate to Marianne, with whom he might have had a healthy relationship. Such have been his excesses, though. Anything normal would now seem to pale in comparison to what he seeks, if even he himself knows what that is. Brandon loses sight of what is actually important: his loved ones, his career, his health, while seeming unable to break his self-destructive behavioural cycle. There is some hope of redemption as he almost loses his sister and is shocked into some sort of wake-up. The final scene on the subway is juxtaposed to the scene at bookends in the film in the opening shots. Brandon is a different character now and has the physical and mental scars to prove it. In 2013's 12 Years a Slave, McQueen continues his examination of the body within the context of slavery, The film's unflinching depictions of physical abuse and a commodification of the human body serve as a stark reminder of the brutality endured by enslaved individuals. The body becomes a vessel for the exploration of power dynamics, dehumanization, and a quest for agency in the face of overwhelming oppression. This is based on true events, but, unlike the film, the real-life story does not offer an ending that satisfies. Yes, Solomon Northup was freed from slavery, but at some point his diaries and any other documentation ceased to be journaled, leaving a mystery as to his actual fate. The film itself again uses the body in a few scenes, and one in particular, to literally leave the marks of inhumanity in the form of corporal destruction. The scourging scene in the latter half of the film is symbolic of the shame that still scars or haunts the American psyche, and that America as a cultural entity has not yet come to terms with, even a century and a half later. The film shows how good people, in quotes, can be as malevolent as the outwardly evil ones by virtue of their silence and ineffectual ways, maintaining a status quo that they know benefits them and, if abolished, would see an end to their prosperity. Widows in 2018 introduces a different dimension to McQueen's use of the body. While still addressing societal issues, the film explores the body as a site of empowerment, particularly through the female protagonists. McQueen's framing of the characters' bodies and physical actions underscores their strength and resilience in the face of adversity, challenging traditional gender roles and expectations. There is one actual scene of bodily torture, and this serves to depict the corruption of the strong over the more vulnerable in the community. But generally, less obvious here is the corporeal mortification on display in the three previously discussed movies. However, one can identify the corruption and inequality of an American city that serves as the backdrop for a slick and beautifully staged heist movie. Like McQueen's other films, there are many things at play at one time. America is on display here. It is never more clearly emphasized than in one scene where a car ride across the city takes place, where dialogue is heard through the windshield and the city itself is displayed visually as a reflection on the same windshield. It shows how small in some ways the city can be, and by turns have so many juxtaposing microcosms of society right next to one another. In a short car ride, we see disadvantaged areas and leafy green affluent neighbourhoods all in one short jaunt. What McQueen is trying to show us is also what is polarising the United States right now, the gulf between rich and poor and the disappearing middle. Widows takes a patriarchy and turns it on its head, showing the gender gap. It shows us political corruption and double standards, albeit in a heightened and fantastical form. McQueen's deliberate attention to the body as a thematic allegory extends beyond mere representation. It becomes a narrative device that elicits visceral reactions from the audience. The body in his films becomes a canvas that conveys the profound impact of societal issues, making his work not only intellectually stimulating, but emotionally resonant and memorable. The suffering and catharsis experienced by the characters are not mere abstract concepts, but are etched onto their bodies, demanding empathy, understanding, and posing questions we cannot simply turn away from. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for notifications. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.